Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the AIR-sponsored corporate panel, My Company's COVID-19 Story Then and Now. Before we begin, I'd like to start with some housekeeping issues. Firstly, we'll be having a Q&A for the panel. So on the bottom of your Zoom window, you can type in your questions and we'll be happy to read it to the panel during the session. Number two, this Zoom session is being recorded. As a follow-up, we'll be sending you a copy of the recording, bios of our esteemed panel, AIR's COVID-19 resource page link, safe landing services, and our latest COVID-19 survey entitled Looking Forward to Businesses Reopening. I think you'll really enjoy the information that you'll receive post today's seminar. So let me introduce to you our esteemed panel. We have Linda Janoska. She is the Senior Manager, Global Staffing and Mobility at Lam Research, headquartered in Fremont, California. Linda has 25 years of experience, all of it in the Silicon Valley. Prisco Morales is the Director of Global Mobility. Prisco is with eBay, headquartered in San Jose, California, and he has 15 years experience in both tax and relocation. Tracy Pham is the Senior Specialist Global Mobility at Edwards Life Sciences in Irvine, California. Tracy has 10 years plus experience in global mobility and is currently the President of Southern California Relocation Council. Yuki Watanabe is the Director of Global Mobility. She's with Gap Inc., which is headquartered in San Francisco, California. And Yuki comes with 15 years plus experience also in tax and relocation. We have Angela Gomez. She's our Director of Sales, Western Region with AIRS. She's out of the Huntington Beach office and been with us for 4 years. And last but not least is myself, Dr. Sherry Sinaga. I'm an account executive with AIRS, also out of the Huntington Beach office here in California, and been in the industry for 20 years. We all now have a collective experience of living through one of the most challenging historical times in our life with this pandemic COVID-19. Each one of us, every one of us has a story to tell, and we can relate when we hear others telling their stories. So today, our panel is going to share their corporate experience for response, recovery, and flourish. Today, we look at 3 questions on the response. How did your company respond to the COVID-19 announcement? Recovery. How did your company jump into action to manage your business? And flourish. What does the impact of COVID-19 mean for the future of your company and your global mobility program? So Linda, I'm going to start with you. Lam was one of our first clients to put restrictions on travel early on in January. So please tell us how that decision came about, how that was handled, and also about the employees traveling to Wuhan during the time when the shutdown came about.
Thanks, Sherry, and I appreciate you giving me time to share my story with Lam Research. For those of you who are not familiar with Lam Research, we are a manufacturing facility and we make the machines that make the microchips. So that gives you a little bit of a background. We are a manufacturing concern, but not only do we manufacture, we go onto our client sites to do the installation. So having said that, we're a very global company. We are also very focused in China. We have 5 sites in China. And one of the drivers was the fact that we had over 50 expats across all our sites in China. So when COVID hit, one of our guiding principles at Lam is that employees and families really their safety comes first. So we wanted to reach out to them to see if they wanted to evacuate. They didn't have to. but it was a big job. So on January 23rd, which was very early on when I talked to some of my colleagues, we pulled together a site incident management team, and that consisted of safety and security, HR support, benefits, travel, and global mobility. And we had daily meetings, but the initial point was to identify the people that were in China and give them the option to leave with their families. And it was at the expense of LAM, because we wanted to make sure that they didn't have to worry about paying for that as well. We did have to identify the employees. Travel was responsible for tracking the business travelers, because Global Mobility does not manage the business travelers. But it was really a feat. I know that a lot of my other colleagues had that fun as well, trying to make sure that their employees, if they did want to evacuate, could get on the few planes that they had available. At the same time, we were also in process of transferring 4 new expats into Wuhan. So very quickly, we had to reverse all the work that we had already done to try to secure leases and autos and all the fun stuff. The other thing that we did was we canceled all travel into China, and we also canceled all non-essential travel. So as far as exposing our employees, regardless of where they were in the world, if it was non-essential, it was canceled. And it required the approval of the CEO staff member for you to get on that plane. So in other words, it really needed to be critical for you to get on that plane. We also, you know, it was daily meetings, it was very intense, and we knew that we couldn't handle the globe on our own. So we very quickly also pulled together a site incident management team for each individual site, because obviously while one country may be red, another one may be yellow, and what's good for one is not necessarily good for the other. We also had a regional incident management team, and obviously they worked on the region. It was pretty crazy. We did very early on also start asking questions when people came into the office. Have you recently traveled to China in the last 14 days? Have you had a fever? And a lot of companies started very quickly doing that as well. On March 11th is when US had the travel ban, and we all know how great that was, because we reached out to our expats at that point from the US and talked to management and HR from a strategic position and said, does it make sense for you to repatriate now? If you don't repatriate now, you may not be able to get back in. If everybody remembers that notification that went out, you know, they didn't give us a date, so we had to react pretty quickly. The great thing about that is we were able to partner with the people at AIRS on our account and just identify where everybody was, so we could actually even make that decision. And that was really, really helpful. And very quickly on March 17th, that's when LAM started the work from home. So that was even a couple days before California had even instituted the work from home. So, you know, LAM really does care about their employees, and it worked really well. We very quickly, the last thing about that was 2 days later, we were already implementing the remote hiring practices and onboarding I-9. So, you know, we're still hiring, but we're just doing it remotely. And there was just a lot of additional work that went on with all our teams to really make that work.
Thank you, Linda. And one of the things, can you share with us about some of the safe conditions that got put into place for your essential workers?
Yes, I mean, that's one thing. I mean, given the conditions in the manufacturing facility, we need to make sure that our workers were safe, right? and that they were able to, you know, because they're in close quarters. We did cease operations for a very short period of time because we had to have time in order to get the safety measures in place. But what we did was, first of all, we didn't require anybody to come into the office. We didn't say, you, and you need to come on this shift. We requested volunteers. And that way we weren't mandating that people would come in. The thing is that LAM employees understand that we're going to take care of them, and we had more volunteers than we had positions, so it worked out really well. We instituted a lot of things. We put a single point of entry, so there's only one place that you could enter the building. We instituted grab and go free meals, so this way we didn't have to worry about them bringing in something contaminated. And, you know, that was something that worked out really well. They could get their meal and just sit down. And we also had it social distance, like we had marks as to where people needed to sit. The same thing went for when they had to, you know, get in their gowns, right? Because you have to get in the bunny suit, and, you know, there's all the safety equipment that you need to put on. So they were timing it. So only one person was actually putting on their information or putting on their suits at one time. So, you know, it's taken a while to get through it. But, you know, with the social distancing, and they did that even on the production floor, they made sure that everybody's social distancing on the production floor. And we had A and B shifts. So people that came in the A shift never contacted the B shift. And we're actually using that as a model as we're going to start to bring other people back into the company. The best thing about that is our CEO on a meeting Monday just explained to the company that because of all the processes and procedures we put in place, we have not had one incident of COVID-19 in our manufacturing facility. So, you know, it was a really big win for us. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what we did.
Yeah, and that's such an amazing thing by following good protocols that you have nobody that's gotten COVID-19 in an environment where people can be close to each other.
Yep.
So last but not least, I'm going to give you a choice here, Linda.
Okay.
Ramsey or 25 million?
Can I do a little of each? So,
yeah, go ahead, do it.
I just need to brag a little bit because LAM did a couple things. They gave each employee under director level $1,000 to donate to whoever they felt needed it the most. And it could even be a family member who lost their job. They donated all of our excess PPE to local hospitals and facilities that needed it. And then we increased that to 25 million to the COVID-19 relief. So, you know, it makes me feel really good that LAM does that. The one story that I do have that was really fun, so we had an expat who had returned in January with his family to California. He was from Shanghai and he left his dog behind, and he went back in March to get his 80-pound boxer Ramsey. Well, just so happens the first flight he booked was canceled, second flight he booked was canceled. Nobody was taking dogs because things were shutting down even more. Pet transport companies couldn't even help him. He was going to take him into Hong Kong. Then he found out he needed a visa, and if he got the dog across the border, he'd immediately be taken away, put away in quarantine, and the poor dog would be sitting there alone. So lo and behold, you know, they said, okay, well, now we could get a service dog certificate, right? This is in May now, right? So we're 7 weeks beyond when he thought he was going to put the dog on the plane and get him back. Service dog certificate didn't work. Last weekend, he got a flight for his dog out of, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Guangzhou. It was a 2-day drive. So he drove the dog 2 days to get him to the airport, made sure that he made it through all of the checkpoints and everything, waited till he got on the plane, and then drove 2 days back. And now he's packing up to leave. But let me tell you something. I am so happy that this dog made it home. it made my life, you know, it gave me something to look forward to every day. But it was a happy story because he landed in Canada. The family drove up from California, went to the Canadian border to go pick him up, and he was reunited with his family. So anyway, that's my happy story.
That is way awesome. Thank you for that happy story. And I'm sure it was anxiety provoking throughout the whole thing, but it had a great ending. And for
Absolutely.
LAM and what they were doing to help with up to $25 million to the community. So thank you so much for that.
All right, thank you.
Truly amazing, truly amazing. Prisco, I know when this started that you had a new CEO you were bringing in at this time. And at the same time, was eBay's experience anyway similar to Lamb's?
Yeah. Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks, Linda, for sharing your story. It's very inspiring what Lam was able to do there. So appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, a little bit of a different story. eBay is in the e-marketplaces business, as everybody hopefully knows. So we were a little later to react to a lot of this. We weren't necessarily directly impacted, such as Lam, in the sense that we're not in the manufacturing world, and we are in China, but we weren't near Wuhan or any of the initially affected areas. So from that perspective, I felt that we were late on the precaution train. In fact, a lot of the messaging that we were getting from our leadership in the early time, in the February timeframe, was don't panic, everything's okay, continue to come into the office, just take the proper precautions. But we didn't go as far as, like what Linda said, where the desks were separated by a certain distance. There wasn't any sort of like additional guidance that we provided. And that was a very interesting feeling, hearing everything in the news, self-educating yourself, and then getting kind of a mixed message saying, like, don't worry about it, everything's under control, right? So I get it from one perspective. They were trying not to have all of us panic, and they were trying to keep the business consistent. I think, knowing what I know now, I think what eBay saw was like, hey, it's going to probably get pretty crazy for us. People were probably going to shift to the e-marketplace and start doing a lot of their shopping, and we can't really have our employees kind of panic and disperse, and we don't really have a process or a protocol for our workforce, our entire workforce, to go work from home. So it was kind of an interesting time for us. And it literally wasn't until the California shelter in place took place, the Bay Area shelter in place took place, that our leadership sent out a message pretty much the same day and said, hey guys, we have to follow the shelter in place. So go ahead and take the proper precautions to stay home and work from home, talk to your leaders, things like that. But I would say about 1 or 2 weeks before that happened, our mobility team kind of collectively decided, like, hey, we got to get ahead of this. We got to make sure that once this decision happens, or if this decision happens, we have to be able to have the information readily available. So I would say about 10 days before the shelter in place in California, we partnered with AIRS to run all of our reporting, to figure out where everybody was, where are our expats, where are our extended business travelers, where are our new hires, where are our permanent transfers, where is everybody? And so once we got a sense of the volume that we were talking about, the in-process relocations, the in-process cases, same with immigration, getting in touch with them, finding out where are all of our in-process folks, then bringing that to the table and saying, well, this touches recruiting, this touches our HR operations team. Everybody has a hand in onboarding and recruiting and hiring and making sure that people get from one place to another. So we ended up forming a mini COVID-19 task force initially to try to address some of these initial concerns of where is everybody and what are we going to do. But I think everybody can empathize that there wasn't a policy, there wasn't a procedure, there wasn't a handbook that somebody pulled out and said, hey, here it is, here's the epidemic handbook, take it, do exactly what you need to do. Everybody was kind of doing their own thing, off in silos initially. But once we started collaborating and started communicating with one another, we'd realized that everybody was kind of working on the same thing. So I would say there was about 3 or 4 different mini COVID-19 task force around eBay, and we all, united. We all figured out who was leading what, and we united, and then we started sort of doing a lot of the heavy lifting and blocking and tackling together. And similar to what Linda was saying, eBay was still hiring during this time. In fact, it was a lot more, as it started developing, there was a lot of pressure to hire even greater volumes than we originally were expecting, as we started kind of predicting what this might mean to e-marketplaces. So interestingly enough, as you mentioned, Sherry, we actually onboarded our CEO remotely. So talk about learning how to onboard your entire organization remotely. We were hiring employee number one basically and remotely, and trying to figure all of that out. And we were trying to onboard somebody on the mobility team during that same exact time. And I was thinking, wow, this is taking a really long time. It's taking 2 weeks to onboard somebody remotely. I found out later, oh, it's because everybody was onboarding the CEO. So that was an interesting learning curve, and we're still learning about it right now. I think that's kind of been one of the fallouts of all of this, is that when you onboard remotely, there's a lot of implications surrounding that. There's the immigration implication. Linda mentioned I-9, but also the work location, right? If they were going to relocate to San Jose, there's the relocation piece. There's the job posting piece. There is the disclosing where they're going to be working. Originally, we thought they were going to be working in San Jose, but now they're still working out of Oregon or Seattle or Washington. And so modifying the work permit information, as well as the corporate tax implications, right? And I think that's something that's evolving right now at eBay. As of right now, eBay's set to go back to work on July 1st or after June 30th. But obviously there's been a lot of different information out there. Twitter mentioned they're never going back to work, and Google and Facebook are saying that they're going back in 2021. And I think on the surface that all seems great. Everybody has to follow the proper precautions and make sure that the workforce is safe. But there's a lot of trickle effects to that, right? Like, what does that mean to our relocation program? What does that mean to corporate tax and the individual implications? We're finding out through all of this, all the different cases of people that are affected by COVID, that are stuck in different places, but also the people that decided to go ahead and relocate somewhere else and say, hey, I'm going to ride this out with my parents in New Jersey, or I'm going to ride this out in Phoenix, Arizona with my girlfriend, or whatever the case might be. And so those cases are starting to pop up and say, hey, well, you're payrolled out of San Jose. How do we handle that, right? We don't have an entity in Rutherford, New Jersey. Like, how do we handle that? So I think we're starting to kind of, as this is all shaking out, we're starting to realize how complex everything COVID-19 related was. And same thing with immigration, right? Like, immigration, you can temporarily work outside of your home location for up to 90 days, but what about after that? It might have an implication on your visa as well. So there's a lot of things that are shaking out that are definitely keeping us very, very busy.
And eBay, 180,000 employees worldwide. It's a massive fire drill. It's not a little fire drill putting all that together. But one of the things I think that has been so inspiring, Prisco, that you shared with us, is the impact eBay is having, not only to California, not only to the United States, but to the whole world. Can you share with us what you folks are doing for small businesses?
Yeah, it's been really, really inspiring. Obviously, when you have a deep pocketbook, you have a lot of choices on what you do with your money and how you can help the community. And one of the ways in which eBay has stepped up to try to help, not just the United States, but like you said, globally, is by really reaching out to the businesses that have been impacted the hardest by COVID-19, the small businesses, your local mom and pop shops that you love to go to, that you love to support, but you really couldn't during this time, and that they also couldn't necessarily survive during this time, or weren't going to survive during this time. So one of the very first initiatives that eBay took on in the very beginning is identifying that business sector, immediately developing a program for them, and starting to do preemptive reach outs to them, not waiting for these small businesses to go out of business, but reaching to them while there was still hope, and there was still a need by everybody, and bringing them onto the platform, training them on how to get onto the platform, helping them transition their payments over to the platform, teaching them how to expand their business so that The hope would be that they stay in business, but also that they progress and grow their business as a result of COVID-19. So it was really an opportunity for obviously eBay to win, but also for all the small businesses around the country and around the world to win, and give them hope that once this settles down and shakes out, however it will, that there is another way in which they can pivot their businesses and succeed.
What an amazing story, Prisco, for what eBay does to, I mean, honestly, probably keep a lot of communities going because of the fact they can do business on your platform. So thank you so much. That is so inspiring.
Yeah, no, and even if you don't have a business, I found myself doing a lot of home projects. So found myself listing more stuff on eBay and definitely buying more stuff on eBay. So it's been fun.
That's awesome. Okay, thank you. We're going to change now to Tracy. For those of you who may not know, I mean, when we think about COVID-19, it's usually considered upper respiratory, dealing with the lungs. But what they have found is that it also, the virus attaches to the heart as well as the kidneys. And one of the key leaders in helping with devices for hearts is Edwards Lifesciences. Edwards definitely is in the forefront in this fight with COVID-19, so we thank you for them. So Tracy, share with us the initial response that Edwards had when COVID-19 was first announced.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. So basically, I think it's pretty similar to Prisco, where our leadership was just kind of giving us updates and kind of keeping us calm and basically saying, you know, that they're following reliable sources such as the CDC and the WHO, and to not really panic and things like that. It was the week of March 9th that we kind of got a heads up from our leadership that we should probably start preparing to work from home. And it was a very memorable day, Friday the 13th, that we were officially told to not come back on Monday. And so we brought all of our stuff, like monitors or whatever we needed, paperwork, whatever, to bring with us. And then that weekend, basically the next 48 hours was basically a marathon for the leadership team, just to kind of come up with a task force. And they already had a task force and they met daily, but like the head of facilities, the health and safety, executive leadership, and our HR leadership, and our HR leadership had to be pulled from their regular jobs in order to come up with anticipated questions from managers and employees that, you know, how do I get paid? How do I work from home? What do I do if I'm sick? I mean, just the things that you really can't prepare for in this type of pandemic. Who knew we'd ever be in this situation? I surely didn't. And then basically, we went to virtual interviews right away, our GTA team, and we also met up with our housing or area tour or DSP provider to see if they could do virtual area tours and things like that, just to keep things going, set expectations with them, and just kind of make sure that we could still go, because we're still hiring. We still have to make heart valves and critical care monitors for patients. And so we definitely have to keep business going. We also reached out to different employees around the world, like our expats. We don't have a ton. I mean, we have a good amount, but we only actually had one expat in China that sent his family home for safety until things get back to normal. Everyone else is basically staying put. The other thing is in Singapore, we had some employees that are Malaysian that didn't go home. They chose to actually stay back in Singapore, so we had to provide housing for them. And then in addition, I think on the other thing on mobility side is we had to provide an additional 6 months of relocation. So instead of just the 1-year standard, we also provided an additional 6 months.
That makes sense, Tracy. What we find today is that 6% of companies have modified their relocation benefits, and an extension like you folks are doing for 6 months is one of the key benefit changes. You have an interesting story about a hazmat suit.
Yes, I do. We actually had an employee come from Switzerland. His wife is Israeli, and she basically needed to come over, but she couldn't leave Switzerland right away. and they basically had to figure out how to get her over here. And the week of the 9th, we had warned them and said, hey, you really need to find a way to come over here before Friday, because there's going to be a travel ban. And we kind of, we didn't have a heads up. It was official, but we knew it was coming. So again, we were kind of rushing to get them over here. So he came over. She couldn't come, but she ended up going to Israel, and she stayed there for 14 days, did a self-quarantine, and her and her husband was able to figure out a way to get her to come over in a hazmat suit on the airplane. And then she did self-quarantine at home. Definitely something I've never ever experienced until I thought I knew everything in mobility, or not everything. You definitely feel like you live a lot of different things in mobility. This was definitely one that I'll never forget.
Yeah, I know. I can hardly do a mask for 30 minutes, so I can't imagine being in a hazmat suit for hours traveling overseas, right? But you do what you need to do.
Yeah, for sure. And now they're back together, so it's a good story.
It is a good story. Love wins.
For sure.
Tracy, one of the things you truly inspired us is about what happened with your kitchen. Can you share that?
Yeah, so our CFO was noticing that we have about 50 members in our kitchen. We have a 7,000 square foot cafeteria on campus. And basically those employees, a good amount of them were all home, getting paid. And so we took about a good portion of them, and he said, why don't we just have them make meals and we can give to local shelters? So we're actually giving to shelters at Mercy House and Illumination Foundation. And we serve about 400 meals a day just from our local kitchen.
That is way inspiring, that that you folks have looked at your own resources, realized what can we do to help others around us, and continue to do so. Thank you for being such a good role model for us here in Southern California.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. And now we'll turn to Yuki. So Yuki, GAP has had some previous disasters in crisis management, which you've been involved with, but what's the difference between COVID-19 and some of these other crises that you had to handle?
So how we responded is somewhere between Lam Research and Tracy and Prisco's story. So we were not manufacturers. We do retail, so we do work with the manufacturing of a product. So Asia is our hub for production of our product. So when the COVID-19 hit in Asia, we reacted pretty quickly, but we didn't go to the extent of rolling out globally on bringing people back, or restrictions or safety measures. What we did was we rolled out based on the local regulations and restrictions, and tackled accordingly. So when Asia was hit, we closed all the stores in China, some of them in Japan. So that kind of rolled out regionally, eventually to US. So the biggest difference between what we had in the past versus the COVID-19 is that the past crisis, whether it's a fire or hurricane, or the most latest would be the Hong Kong protest, it's regional, or it's contained in one location. The pandemic was global. So there was no way to redeploy people that were displaced. So when we had a hurricane or a fire, we were able to get almost 100,000 retail employees redeployed from one location to another. We had no place to redeploy. So that puts us in a tremendous financial constraint. So dealing with the crisis in making sure the employees' safety and health was coupled with how to deal with the financial crisis. So that was the biggest difference. In terms of expats, we don't have a lot of expats. A lot of them are concentrated in Asia. But because the COVID-19 kind of hit in Asia right around the time the Chinese New Year's, none of our experts were actually in China. So they were all, we had to deal with a situation where they couldn't go back to China from wherever they were vacationing. So we had some challenges in getting them back, but they're all back. We had given them an option to either come home or go somewhere else, or just sending their family back home. None of them, except for one, wanted to come home. Partially because all of our expats are in leadership positions, so they felt it was important for them to be with the people that they lead in a location and write it out with them.
Yuki, that's your industry, and we know retail has certainly been an industry that has been impacted. So what's some of the learnings or the surprise byproducts of this unfortunate incident in regards to Gap?
So part of it was how we dealt with the financial crisis as well. Some of the things that we didn't have to do before to this extent was tremendous financial exercise and looking at, and this is where ARIS came in really handy in running a reports. And let's say if we needed to furlough employees, what are the financial implications and moving them back? If we just move them back, it's a right thing for us to do is to move them back to where they came from. What is the cost? If we forgive all our payback, how much would that be? Or looking at projects, can we delay the project? Can we get rid of the project? How do we drive cost savings or delay in expense recognition to write out, basically to preserve cash? And in that exercise, I don't think anybody expected it, but we can I think we all learned when you're forced to do it, you can do it. And our company culture likes to have everybody in a headquarter location, wherever they are, but we had no options. So, and especially in product and design teams, where you have storyboard and create a product with a story behind it, look at those samples, color friends, the feel, the fabric, those they had never imagined to be able to do this remotely because they were, but in crisis, they had to do it. So the biggest learning is if there's a will, there's a way.
Exactly. And Yuki, I remember hearing
they still need everyday clothing. That's how we are told.
Maybe.
Thank you.
Yeah, no.
And this is one of the problems being because in source there were for linking a lot of questions. So what we did was we created this HR resource center for internal employees, deal with internal employees questions. It could be anything from how do I manage kids and work and husband, or how do I solve a math problem for my kids? Anything, and some of them just want to. So we built this resource center within a matter of days, and it's all internal volunteers. We had more volunteers wanting to help on top of their daily job than they needed.
Wow, that's inspiring, all the unifying that took place within your organization to help each other. I mean, that's what a community is about. So kudos to the Gap team. Yeah. Angela, do we have some questions that you'd like to share and ask the panel?
Sure, we did have a question come in. How are companies modifying or adjusting assignments for those that are on active assignment but are staying in home country for the duration of the pandemic? So I thought maybe Linda, we could start with you if you don't mind taking that one.
Sure, I could take that. When the travel ban actually came up, there was a deeper analysis that was done on expat by expat case. And in some cases, so we didn't have a situation where somebody returned that needed to stay in the host location. Most people stayed there. We do have a couple assignments that we did end early, and they had to follow up or finish up parts of it from the home country. We just made sure that there wasn't going to be any tax issues in terms of doing work in a place where they shouldn't be doing it to be in compliance. But for LAM, it wasn't an issue. There was a couple people that did remain in China, and there's a couple people that remained even in Israel, and were comfortable to do so. I hope that answers the question. We really didn't have too much of an issue with it.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. I appreciate that. And I'm not sure, Prisco, if you're still on, if maybe each of you wanted to respond, since that is really the only question that we have so far right now.
Yeah, no, very, very similar to LAM's approach. We did take a look at all of our active expats out there. We took a look at them in detail, their individual cases, locations, length, how much time was left, etc. We did not take a position to repatriate everybody. We didn't take a position to go ahead and bring people home to write it out here in the US. It was, again, we did go case by case, but in the end, nobody ended up repatriating. They're settled into their host location. They have housing, their families are there. They basically all wrote it out there on location. We are continuing to monitor the situation as borders start to open up, if there's different needs, if there's different requests, things like that, leaving the communication line open, but no major decisions were made to change anything about their expat assignments.
Thank you for sharing. Yuki, I see that you have some things to add.
So we didn't have to do anything for the existing assignments, but we do have about 20 employees that's been waiting to go to China, some of them since January. So what we ended up doing was started assignment for their assignment, but we had to create a service agreement between the companies. So to tackle the PE issues. So we do have people that are technically on assignment, so they're doing the job from their home country, but obviously they're not receiving assignment allowances because they're not in country. And we also have several people that cannot come to US as a new hire. So we ended up hiring them in a location where we could and onboarded them and to buy some time until they can come. So we're dealing with two separate contracts. So hiring them in a location where they are, and once the border is open or it's safe to do so coming to the US, then we will terminate them from that country and we'll rehire them in the US. It doesn't work for every country, but we're trying to do that wherever we can, because a lot of them had already turned in their resignation with their company. So, and we can't just ask them just not doing anything and not getting paid.
Thank you for sharing. And Tracy, I know you're in your car, so I'm not sure if you're still there and you would like to. We did have a couple more questions come through as well.
I mean, it's pretty similar. Anybody that really needs to be taken care of, like I mentioned the Malaysian, they were nationality from Malaysia, but they were working in Singapore. We took care of their housing. The family that wanted to get out of China, we let them come back, but they'll eventually go back to China when things clear up. So kind of similar, nothing really, I mean, it's just kind of whatever anyone needs. We're just kind of trying to help people out. That's just to sum it up.
Thank you. I think it kind of leads into, I think the next question, which is, has anyone with visa expirations that have been impacted by travel bans and border controls?
I don't think there's anybody that hasn't been impacted by that. I'm pretty thankful. We, at the end of the day, we only had one person. Unfortunately, she was in China and is still in China because she can't get her visa stamp. But it's actually okay because she has family there and we have plenty of opportunity for her to work. So we just made sure that there weren't any PE issues, and we found a place for her, and right now she's just waiting it out. The other problem is how many L1s do you have that we're going to go for visa stamping, that, you know, the embassies are closed, the consulates are closed. We're just tracking all of those, and there's quite a few. I see Prisco nodding his head. So, you know, we're all kind of in the same boat from that perspective. It's just wait and see. I do foresee that as the consulates start to open up, there's probably going to be a pretty huge rush and a pretty long line to get everything through and processed. It's just, and I know for LAM specifically, because we announced a couple months ago that we're bringing up a new manufacturing facility in Penang, and, you know, Ayers knows this because they're still getting authorizations from us right now on our expats, and we're getting them lined up, you know, just like the plane's ready to take off. You know, business is not going to stop. We're waiting, you know, to get the green light and for things to go from red to orange to yellow to green.
Yeah, it sounds very familiar. I know, I'm not sure if the rest of you have anything to add to that, or if you feel similarly.
Yeah, I would just add that immigration has taken up the majority of my time during, especially in the beginning. It's starting to kind of taper off a little bit, but so all across the board, U.S. immigration, global non-U.S. immigration. In the U.S., the suspension of premium processing did hinder our ability to renew visas quite a bit. It hindered our ability to onboard people. Definitely had people that fell out of status. Definitely had people that we had to figure out alternatives of how to get them to work wherever we could. Same as Yuki, had to go through the corporate tax avenue to determine PE issues. Very, very time-consuming process. All the U.S. consulates closing abroad, people not able to renew or extend their visas abroad. It was just every day was a fire drill for a solid 3 to 4 weeks. It was pretty crazy.
I was going to say, in addition to what your companies have all done to help the communities and your employees, I know that many of you have had to adjust your work schedules and work different hours and off hours with your children at home, from babies to toddlers to grown. So I know you're trying to get through this the best you can too. We have another question. Any changes to the mobility policies due to the pandemic? Are you looking into new service providers? So I don't know if Yuki, you want to, anything to add on that one from your side?
No, we typically don't make any changes unless we see a trend for at least 3 years. Where in terms of changes, we're very conservative. So we're not the first ones to make any changes. We want to see what other people are doing. If it's working, all the bugs are worked out, then we'll consider it.
Thank you. How about for the rest of you?
I was just going to chime in. I think the only thing that we were really looking into is if we found out that some of the housing providers have quarantine services. And so in case somebody wanted to come home, we looked into it. We didn't have to use it, but it was kind of cool to know. So in case we're ever in this again, at least everyone should know now that that does exist.
Yes, we also rolled that out on our end too, to help get people through this time.
Yeah, and at eBay, we didn't necessarily change any policies, and we're not necessarily ready to implement new policies. I think the crazy thing about this whole time is that there was no policy for this, right? It was just more adapting our existing policies for the nature of what was going on. So we have made a lot of exceptions to policy. In terms of temporary housing, how long we're offering it for, things of that effect. One of the things that we're looking at closely right now is releasing the lump sums. Do we stick to our traditional 2 week before onboarding, or do we change it to now 2 weeks before they relocate? You know, just kind of looking at these things in detail that worked really well before an epidemic, and during an epidemic don't work so well. So taking a look at policies like that, I think flexibility is just something that the business has been really good about. making sure that everybody's just taken care of.
Thank you, Prisco. There's a couple of more questions we can combine, I think. So one is, how about the panel's projections on business as we begin to open up? Same as last year, more or on hold? And then a similar question, will there be a reduction or enhancement of the mobility budget that you can see come out of this? And so Linda, maybe we could start with you on that one.
Yeah, you know, honestly, because we're manufacturing and essentially we've gotten more orders and none of our orders were canceled. So that's a plus for us. We need to, we're going to have to ramp up. And even now, as other companies are letting people go, we're still hiring. So from Lamb's perspective, it's going to be, you know, full speed forward. I don't anticipate, I mean, we may have a slowdown, I'm thinking in terms of expats, but it really depends upon what our management decides is the right thing to do. I mean, like I said, we have a ramp in Penang and we have a couple expats lined up to go there already. We have the expats going to Wuhan. We have those lined back up again. I don't know what's going to happen about the relocation movement, but we do have a ton of internal transfers. And my guess is that there is going to be some movement with internal transfers to help some of the businesses regroup and do whatever needs to be done to get things back to quote unquote the new normal. But for us, I don't think our volume is going to change. It may dip for a little while as we're trying to figure out who can go where and when and why.
Thank you. I know, Sherry, we've got about 4 minutes left. Do we have time for another question?
Why don't we'll send the questions to the panel, and then as our follow-up, we'll send it out so we'll make sure that we're responding to every one of you. So thank you for those questions. And thank you, Angela, for leading us out on that. We'll also be sending out to you folks our latest COVID-19 survey about reopening. Some of the questions that you had, it was about changes. So what we see right now is 6% of companies have made policy changes, 14% are considering policy changes, and there's a list of 7 benefits that people are looking at. We'll send that information so you can share that within your organization. But lastly, I just wanted to share that I'm very proud to be part of the Ayers family. Our leadership has been very proactive in the safety and health of all their employees worldwide, and yet focused on to continue to service our customers with a high level touch of service. Our executive team met daily in the beginning with an initial response with weekly communications to all of the employees worldwide with the message, we got this. In addition, we're gonna share with you as part of our follow-up some of the things that our task force has created. This includes our COVID-19 resource page, and this is a page that will give you the latest information about shipping, logistic updates, country-specific partner updates, immigration updates, all on one single link. So we'll send that out to you as well. Ayers also created some special programs for transferees moving during COVID-19. We're calling it our Ayers Safe Landing Service for self-quarantine and home sanitization. So that will be part of the follow-up as well. But lastly, I'm really proud that Ayers has been very active in supporting meals to be sent to hospitals and to first responders. We're doing our part too, just like each of our fellow panelists here and their companies, to let our heroes out there who are fighting for our communities know how much we appreciate them. And if the little bit that we can do is to feed you for the day, that's what we want you to do. But I thank you all for your time. Please keep safe, keep healthy, and we look forward to our next webinar with you. Take care. Bye.